But let's say that in the church congregation, you should choose one translation for continuity and avoidance of confusion in the congregation when reading, preaching, teaching, etc. Well, then how should Christians go about picking that one translation of the Bible over another? What criteria should they use? Well, Dr. Kenneth Barker answers this question. Listen.
Now, when it comes to what translation they should adopt, my counsel, frankly, would be this, and you may be surprised to hear this from someone who is so closely identified with the NIV. But my counsel would be this. If you are convinced that the Textus Receptus, the Greek text that lies behind the King James in the New Testament, is the correct Greek text, then adopt the King James Version for your church. Or, if you prefer it updated into modern English and so forth, then adopt the New King James Version. On the other hand, if you believe that the majority text is the correct text to use in the New Testament, then I think definitely you should go with the New King James simply because it's the closest. There is no translation of what is called a majority text. It doesn't exist, but the closest is the New King James. And so if that's the text you believe in, I would say use that. If you believe in what I call a reasoned eclectic approach when it comes to considering the Greek text of the New Testament, by which I mean you do take into account all of the Greek manuscripts and papyri that have been discovered since 1611 when the King James translators did their work, you take that into account and give weight where you think it's necessary following accepted principles of determining the original text, where you believe that the earlier texts point to a different text and you want to go with that, then if you believe in a more literal word-for-word type translation, adopt the NASB. On the other hand, if you believe in a more middle-of-the-road, mediating, balanced translation, then adopt the NIV. That would be my counsel. And I think if you practice that, no churches will be split.
All right, a lot of that is on practicality, Art, okay? Take the two spots yourself. One is theologically. Is having a different translation, obviously you're general editor of New King James. Could you sit in a church where the guy had the NASB or the new or NIV, or would you have to break fellowship? That's number one. Number two, other practical things you might want to say.
I wouldn't break fellowship. In my years of preaching, when we started Christ Congregation, which Ken addressed to introduce the NASB, we all used the NASB. But then I started studying textual criticism, as it's called, and came to the conclusion that the majority text, not the TR as such, but it is similar, was a better text. We actually went back to the King James. Even though it was archaic, we felt that the text was more important. And then when the New King James came out, we've been using that. I would be uncomfortable to be in a church where everything was geared to a version that was not, but I'm not an average person. In other words, the average person hasn't spent all this time in footnotes and everything. But I do agree with Ken's view that I think it's a very good view about unity. If you need to use one text for memory work and the pulpit and everything, otherwise you get people not knowing what is the Bible, and it's chaotic. So I agree with that.
Why is it, Don, that most of the seminaries have chosen to use New American Standard?
Well, I think the New American Standard continues to be recognized, as Ken was just mentioning, as a literal translation, very word for word. And I think now what we have with the New American Standard, we've done an update on it already, so we've eliminated a lot of archaic words that probably didn't need to be there, and we could have kept the literal text anyway. We're very conservative in terms of the way we deal with the Greek text. We're not eclectic. We still expect the best words or the best readings to be in the best manuscripts, and we operate that way. And we have some other things that I identify as a mark of conservatism. For one thing, we don't subscribe to Markan priority, the theory that Mark was written first and Matthew and Luke borrowed Mark or took it and corrected it and so forth, and that's become a very popular doctrine even in a lot of conservative seminaries and so forth. We reject that. We hold to an independent view of the Gospels, and I think things like that are the reasons that it's not only used in seminaries, but in churches where there's a lot of emphasis on the original languages and on a proper reading of it. And hopefully with the update we've got something more readable too.